Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our event design, Untold Stories from Behind the Curtain. We are so excited to have you all on this morning. If you have any questions or comments during today's event, please feel free to use the chat function. Let's begin with a few quick introductions for each of our panelists. Would each of you share a little bit about yourself and your role, as well as maybe a favorite event that you've attended recently? Would you begin, Liz? Let's kick it off.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Wyatt. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here. It's a great way to start the day on Tuesday. So I am the Vice President of Human Resources at Zywave. And so for those of you who aren't familiar, Zywave is a software company that is headquartered here in the Milwaukee area. And it's a bit of a hidden gem in the Milwaukee market. We are actually the largest software company in Milwaukee. We have about 1,100 employees globally, and 325 of them are based here in Milwaukee. So just in the last 2 years, our headcount has really tripled through a lot of acquisition activity. And throughout COVID, obviously, we have moved to a dispersed and virtual work environment. So we've really spent a lot of time in the last year thinking about our company traditions and events and the way that we can engage our employees. And then prior to Zywave, I worked with a hospitality management group. So I also got to see, really behind the scenes of event making and execution, which is a really different angle to take. Wait, do you want me to do the other personal event thing right away? Okay.
Yeah.
And so they also asked us just to share that event that we've attended recently that was special and exciting for us. So here's a picture of our Zywave crew just this past September. We take a group of our top performers on an incentive trip annually. And so we pick a different destination and they get to spend a couple of days with the leadership team, really kind of celebrating their achievements. So this group went to Santa Fe at the end of September, and we really had a couple of days to bond and network and kind of immerse ourselves in the Santa Fe culture, which was a lot of fun. This photo is from our last dinner. And we had a little surprise performance. So, in event planning, it's always great to leave a fun and unexpected surprise for your audience. And so we had a flamenco dancer and musician come and really close out the evening. And it was really intimate and kind of intense in the way that they performed. So a really cool, unique way to end the event.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Liz. Corinne, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Definitely. Hi, everyone. My name is Corinne Plussel. It's great to see you all here. My current role is as a program and communication manager for AMPed Association Management. We're based in Madison, Wisconsin. And in my current role, I get to serve 2 clients through our association management company, one of which is the Society for Research on Adolescence, and I am their meetings manager. So for today's purposes, I'll be coming to you from that angle of event design as far as conference and annual meeting management goes. My other client is Women in Government Relations. They are based in DC, and they are a professional organization, and I do their marketing, communications, graphic design, and a little bit of programs development. So I'll also come at the angle from the knowledge of planning in DC. Prior to my role at AMPed Association Management, I worked for Destination Madison, which is the tourism entity for Madison and Dane County. I was their event manager, and so I have a lot of perspective when it comes to working on events in the tourism industry and for the hospitality industry. So excited to just bring you a breadth of knowledge from all of those areas. My photos are here from my favorite event over the last few years, and it was I'm not trying to bring up any COVID feelings here, but it was a pod concert. I know some of us got to attend those during this season of life. And this was Mount Joy at an outdoor venue in Madison. And honestly, it was probably the first live event back after such a wave of COVID. And so this was like the most fun I ever had. Plus, I really like to dance at concerts. And so having a pod is great for having my own space. So that's also why I liked it.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Corinne. Megan, would you like to share a little bit about yourself next?
Definitely. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Otto, and I am an event producer here at NEWaukee. I've been at NEWaukee for about a year. Prior to that, I worked in corporate marketing for a physical therapy company. And then before that was at GMR Marketing, a global experiential agency. And over the breadth of all of these, I've got to touch a lot of different clients, from current clients here like North Shore Bank, which we do a lot of community events for, to touching clients like the night market here in Milwaukee and Milwaukee Tool, where it's a little bit more internal with the employee engagement side. So I do have a wide breadth of both external community building on the client side and more of that traditional marketing, building those customer communities, and then along with the internal side of employee engagement. I had worked on a global or a national call center tour for Comcast. So we got to touch a lot of different aspects of different audiences, which I think is really unique in the way that events work. And then here, my most recent favorite event that I've been to was actually was at Lambeau Stadium, and it was the Manchester City versus Bayern Munich game. It was the first Premier League, Champions League game that was ever played here up at Lambeau Field. And it was such a unique experience to have a completely different community of sports fans up in such an iconic stadium like Lambeau Field. And apart from the actual game itself, all of the interactions and activations that they had outside of the stadium at Titletown was incredible to see. To the right there, you see the trophies from both of the leagues that these teams were winners of, that the amount of people waiting in line to take photos with those trophies in a state like Wisconsin, where soccer is just becoming a larger game, is really exciting to see. So that was one of my most favorite events recently.
Thank you, Megan. I'll introduce myself. I'll be the moderator for today's discussion. My name is Wyatt Tinder. I'm the VP of Marketing here at NEWaukee. I've been with NEWaukee for about 5 years now. And this is a recent event that my husband and I attended. We love to go to New Orleans. It's one of our favorite places to visit. And we went to the Jazz Club Spotted Cat on Frenchman Street. They were doing a special kind of block party this particular night. So it was really interesting to see the music spilling out into the street, vendors out on the street. So this was a really great experience. As we get into today's discussion, just wanted to share a couple photos of events that we've hosted here at NEWaukee, but really wanted to share just how dynamic event experiences are, but obviously there's so much that happens behind the scenes, so much planning that goes into these events. And then of course, day of, so much can happen. These are live experiences, they're dynamic. And so today during our discussion, we're going to share a little bit about what happens before events, as well as what happens day of on site as you try to manage the experience. So I will stop sharing my screen for the moment. Wonderful. Well, to kick off our conversation, maybe we would like to just start off by, what are some underrated or overlooked reasons why a brand or an employer would want to host an event? Megan, would you want to share first?
Yeah, no, I think this is a really unique idea with events. There's so many different options that a business or individual can choose to put their money toward for marketing, whether that is online ads, out-of-home ads, all of that traditional aspect of things. But I feel like an event is really that way that you are able to connect with your customers, your audience, that target audience, and really hone in on what it is that makes them tick and build that connection with your brand. The experience is really that opportunity for them to learn a little bit more about your brand and see what it is that ties you two together and why they would want to keep coming back to you. So it's really that relationship building aspect, along with, events are that place where you can really make a splash. And that's the exciting thing about events. They garner media attention, which is that way that apart from just putting paid money behind promoting yourself, there could be that opportunity for an actual outlet to cover your event and give you that free advertising that is going to hit so many more people than you would be able to with a paid ad. So those are some really unique ways that an event can be a really great option for a company to work with. And when I was talking about relationship building here, Wyatt, I think there's also that idea of building community as well. And one of those events that I think does a really great job of this that we have touched here at NEWaukee is the night market. The night market brings not only the community together of people in Milwaukee and people outside of Milwaukee, but it's also those connections that you build at an event. So those vendor connections that you build along with all of the people that you're able to invite to that. So you never know who could be that next person that you'd be able to touch, whether it's bringing together that community and, hey, maybe you're not working with that business currently, but there's that opportunity to invite them to your event and you have that potential to build that bond. And it could be a really great way to get to where you want to be.
Yeah. Liz, I would be curious from the employer side, what would you say are some of the reasons as an employer, as a team, you would host events?
Yeah, and I think it certainly builds on what Megan is saying, because it's really about human connection, right? You don't have that many opportunities to bring people together over some sort of common interest or create a common experience for them. So the human connection is probably, very underrated because it's difficult to measure. So we certainly have been trying to, survey folks after they attend our events. So whether it's a virtual event or an in-person event, just a quick poll question at the end, or sending them an email message afterwards, asking them, did this event add value to your experience, is really kind of the one question we've been asking to try to measure whether or not these are good investments for us, both from a time standpoint as well as financial resources. But investing in human connection is just, something we've really decided is critical to our business, and it's part of our core values. So we always try to tie our events back to our core values as well. And so at Zywave, those values are, grow, belong, and transform. And so it gets pretty easy to kind of loop events into those types of pillars because they really are present throughout our business. And so most recently this year, after kind of living in that virtual world for about 2 years, Zywave decided to really invest heavily and bring all of our employees from across the US to Milwaukee to have an event this past summer. And so from that, kind of this concept of ZyFest was born because we had the event at the Summerfest grounds. And we certainly planned it by committee, so there are a lot of folks involved, but structured it in a way where we try to allocate our time, like 50% of the time on company information, 25% on professional growth, and then 25% on personal development, so that we were kind of touching all of those different aspects that align to our core values.
I'd be interested to hear, what kind of communication and advertising tactics do you think are really successful in, making an event seem like buzzworthy and exciting for those who you want to attend? Corinne, would you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Wyatt. I think we've seen strategies change so quickly over the last few years with just adjustments made to COVID or from COVID. Previously I would have answered this question with like a lot of social media buzz. And I think we all used to use Facebook as our event calendar. And now with the changes to the algorithm and things like that, just posting an event on Facebook and hoping it reaches the people you want is not quite enough. I think speaking from my experience at the tourism entity Destination Madison, the way we kind of creatively marketed events was really around the feeling one has for their community. And that kind of is tying back to that sponsorship answer as well. But as you all know, if you're in the Milwaukee area, those in the Madison area, we all have a great love for our communities and our cities. And so the more we tied into that feeling of you're going to see this first or get to hear about this new exciting restaurant or initiative or nonprofit first, and really give people an opportunity to learn about something coming to their community that we think that they would really enjoy. That's where we really tied in our efforts. I think from the standpoint of our annual meeting, when we're working on kind of my current client, my larger annual meeting, it's all about location. That's really, we can advertise the program as much as possible, but for us, it's for example, our next meeting is in San Diego, California, and it's all about like, bring your family, they'll have fun too, but you're also going to be there and listen to great research being done in the adolescent realm. So I think it's very different based on, of course, what you're advertising, but for us, it's typically about location, city, community, and really building those connections.
Yeah, thank you, Corinne. I think, at NEWaukee, we echo a lot of those thoughts. I think social media is a tool and a tactic, but in recent years, so much has changed that social media alone can't necessarily do everything that you want to do. And that's why I think we really emphasize the community building aspect and making sure that you're out in the community for those community events, bringing in partners on events so that it's not, just one entity, that there are multiple stakeholders who can all share the event and, take ownership in it, make it something that's really great for the community. I see a question in the chat from Aaron talking about how you can leverage influencers to drive awareness of events. I can speak to this a little bit from my perspective. I think what's really important with influencers is selecting the right influencers for the right event. I think we've all talked a little bit about, or all heard a little bit about micro influencers over kind of the large influencers. I think micro influencers, meaning people with, kind of like 10,000 or 20,000 followers, can really make a large impact because of their like high engagement with their audience versus, someone who has, 200,000 followers, who might not have as much of that engagement, one-to-one with some of their followers. And again, making sure that the event and the influencer really align, that they really feel passionate about the event, that it feels authentic coming from that influencer, that, again, authenticity is really important when it comes to influencers. So you need to make sure that aligns, really well. And so one thing that I would just suggest is looking in the spaces and the places that you would want your event to be shared and looking for where those influencers are, and doing some kind of individual outreach there. The other thing with influencers is just not being too prescriptive with what they're sharing. I think sometimes brands think that like, here are all of the assets and the copy that I want you as an influencer to share. And again, it just won't come out authentic if it's not in that particular influencer's voice. We have a question here in the chat. What is this panel's advice around word of mouth marketing? And maybe Megan or Corinne, do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I have one note, kind of something that we do with a lot of our clients right now. We go back to that community building aspect. And one of the things that we have actually started is these community engagement managers at a lot of our different clients with their programs. And they are kind of the people that start that word of mouth. They think of that wedding list of people that they think could be really great people in the community to reach out to, and then begin to spread that message. And I think that is one way to really propel word of mouth, because alone, it's really hard to just depend on it and say, hey, I'm going to tell one person and hopefully the word gets around, but really making it that dedicated effort to spreading that word of mouth and utilizing those people, especially the way that we utilize the community engagement managers to push the message out there and find those people who are really important in the community that they think are going to be the people to help spread it. So I think that's one way to really propel word of mouth advertising a little bit further than it usually can go.
Corinne, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and from my perspective in my current role, working with actually both of my clients, they're both in two industries that I am not actually a part of. I don't work in government relations and I'm not a researcher on adolescents. So we rely heavily on word of mouth marketing within those circles to attract people to our events that might not be a current member. Maybe they're interested in the content. So what I do and what our teams do in the marketing realm is we put together what we call promotional toolkits, which link people directly to graphics they can share, copy that they can customize for social media. We really try and make the work less difficult for those that were asking passively to do some word of mouth marketing for us. So we find that it's a really useful tool, again, in using our attendees or potential attendees networks to do the marketing for us, that they're attending our event or attending a conference and sharing the information to those networks that we might not otherwise reach just through our own channels.
Yeah. Liz, I'd be interested to hear your perspective in terms of how do you get, teams excited about these events internally? How do you kind of get them excited about attending?
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to communication. So we have to have a really robust communication plan and tap into all the different channels that we use as an organization. So really mapping out that calendar and knowing which lever we're going to pull at what point in time. So we also like to make sure that we have some of our influencers on the committees. So get the right people involved in the planning and making some of the decisions so that we know the event will really kind of be created in a way that is representative of the larger employee base. So we definitely don't want to be doing it sort of in a bubble, because we are at the scale now where we have like a dedicated events team internally. But it's really important to still tap into the larger employee base. And then of course you have to tap into the leadership team and the managers that are hosting regular meetings with their groups. So giving them, kind of what Corinne mentioned in terms of the talking points and the things that need to be shared, really kind of prepping them and having them be that intermediary to communicate all of the details and the expectations, right? Sometimes there's some expectation setting for behaviors at certain events or what we want people to be doing. So we really rely on the leadership groups to help us reinforce those messages.
Yeah. Yeah, I would add too, on the NEWaukee side, we often talk a lot about finding the hook of an event. So talking about what is the thing that we think is going to be most grabbing. And I think that can be really helpful with word of mouth marketing too, is finding what is that kind of elevator pitch. How do you describe the event in a sentence so that it's kind of grabby and gets someone's attention? For all of you on the call, I would wonder, how do you make your experiences stand out? We often see certain topics covered frequently, both internally or externally. And sometimes there are, multiple events happening in the community on the same day. So how do you, make your particular event stand out? Would you want to start, Corinne?
Sure, no problem. I wish I would have sent you a couple things in advance now that I'm thinking about my answer, but I think one of the ways that, or something I learned from a gentleman that does experiential design, is I'm always thinking about the sensory aspects of events, right? So what are our attendees seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling? So always trying to incorporate close to all 5 of the senses at events. So for example, I am working with a nonprofit that I'm on the board of to host later this week a fall focaccia art bread workshop. So learning how to make your own kind of vegetable beautification on top of a piece of focaccia bread. And we're really thinking about, the hands-on aspect of that and being able to learn how to do that. But in addition to that, we picked a great demo kitchen space to host it in. So it's a beautiful location to kind of have an intimate gathering of people. And then the other thing which we were really mindful of is making this an alcohol-free event, which you don't see very often these days. I know it's becoming more popular to include mocktails and sober events, but this was an opportunity to say it's an after-work event that there's no bar. We're creating a seasonal mocktail for people to enjoy. But I think it was just our way to make it stand out among some of the other cooking classes or demos that are going on routinely in the area. So we really thought about how and why we would put some of those elements together to create a cool fundraising event for the nonprofit.
Megan, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, I always like to think kind of about your brand itself as well and say, what is your brand's differentiator and how can you play off of that to make it an exclusive event that really hones in on what you're doing, but then also makes it something that your audience wants to be there. So another way to do that really and to make your event stand out is that exclusivity as well. So one of the tactics we always like to do is it's great to have an event that's general admission, open to the public, anyone and everyone can come, but also adding that exclusivity factor with limited tickets or one night only or things of that sort can really draw that pull to get people to come and choose you over any of those other events that maybe they're happening at the same time, but there's another one that happens next month or the month after that. And this is that one night only exclusive time to be there. So that's one really great way to do that. But then also coming off of what Corinne had said, it's so important to think about what do you want your attendees to take away from your experience. That is, you're creating that moment for them that sometimes money can't buy that physical thing. It's that feeling that they need to be able to take away. And that really plays into the senses, like Corinne said. So thinking of all those elements throughout your event is really important. What is it that they're eating at the event? Is there music happening? Is it an exclusive artist that you have brought into this event to come and be there? Really thinking about all of those elements that go into the event and how you want them to feel as they come away from it is also really important.
Liz, I don't know if you have anything to add on, how do you make some of these internal experiences really stand out, make them unique or uniquely Zywave?
Yeah, I think the title matters so much, right? We kind of live and die by our calendar. And so we're just looking at our calendar for the day, deciding like what looks fun or what should I look forward to, or what might be a different experience for me. So as we schedule those events for people and how we label it and whether we're indicating if it's, really a professional learning event or if it's supposed to be kind of fun and interactive, setting that hook, like you mentioned, Wyatt, you really get to do just in the subject line of the email. And so you have to be a little bit catchy and creative and make sure it gives people a reason to join when that, alert actually pops up and it's time for people to come to the meeting, because there's so much going on in a day that they can easily have conflicts or decide that there might be other things that they should focus their attention on. So definitely having a catchy title and making sure that the title actually matches the intent of the session. I think we see that a lot, even with webinars or external facing events, right? That what you maybe signed up for isn't what you really got. And so just really being truthful in that event description about what they're going to experience and giving them all of the detail that you have available. And then internally, variety is the other thing that matters. We know from our survey data that in this sort of distributed work environment, our employees are looking for 30 to 60 minutes per month to spend on virtual networking, right? Just kind of socializing with their peers. And so making sure we have enough variety that will come across over the course of a month that will capture enough interest to get people to really sign up and participate. Because you have the easy joiners that will always come to everything, regardless of what it is. And then you have the other ones that are definitely sort of event specific or topic specific that you're trying to capture.
Yeah, and that's a good insight, Liz. I think, on the NEWaukee side, we've definitely noticed that, coming out of the pandemic, there's definitely fewer people who might be coming out, for whatever reason. I think it's a little bit slower to come out to events. And, noticing just even with some of our in-person experiences, particularly with free registrations, a lot of people signing up, but then fewer people coming on the day. So that kind of like, people are ghosting a little bit more. They're a little, they're a little less likely to attend. And so what you really have to make your experience stand out to make sure people will come on the day. So we've talked a lot about, kind of planning ahead of the event. And we'll get into, day of the event here in a second, but how do you, leverage the experience that attendees have had in person once it's over? What do you do to keep that audience engaged after the fact? Megan, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, from my end, I think one of the greatest things to do is just that little thank you note. It goes a long way. So we leverage a lot of platforms like Eventbrite or Facebook, things like that. It gives you an attendee list that you are able to like send that reach out. If it's not a massive event, you can personalize it a little bit more. If it is one of those larger events, just that little follow-up is a great thing to send their way. And it's also an easy way to just slide that little survey in there as well. So you can get that feedback, because like we've mentioned previously, it's really hard to gauge how successful an event is. Yes, attendance could be one of those reasons, but it could also not include the value of the people or the experience that they had just by the amount of people that you've had there. And really getting that survey in there to get that direct feedback from each of those people is a really great way to see how successful your event is and really get them thinking about, hey, what did I enjoy about this event? Was it a good event? Did I like it? So I think those are some really great, easy elements to do. And then that final one is just get as much video, photo as you possibly can. Anything that you can utilize after the fact is really going to increase that life length of your event and really expand upon it.
Corinne or Liz, do either of you have anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, I'd love to chime in and just echo Megan and say that that little follow-up email is definitely really helpful, especially in collecting feedback. The one thing that I would say I do a little bit differently, or that I like to do, is segment that list. I suppose it's for smaller events, if you have people that have attended and people that registered but didn't attend, and you can send them a little like, sorry, we missed you, or didn't see you there. So you can give them a little bit of a nudge saying like, we noticed you wanted to come, but you didn't make it, acknowledging that things come up. And that's a great place to also share that video or photo. Can't really create FOMO after, but you can a little bit, mention to people that your next event is coming up and it looks just like this and we're going to have so much fun. So a way to like continually bring in the people that are engaged and at least registering for your events, and hopefully get them to really come and attend the subsequent ones.
Yeah, for internal events that are obviously, work focused, we tend to end our sessions with some sort of call to action, right? Something we want them to do after the meeting. So maybe it's a little bit of homework, or maybe it's, asking them to go further some of their peer networking relationships. Other follow-up items that we've kind of tacked onto our events has been, spotlighting different e-learning courses that are available, in our learning management session. So if we've decided that there's a topic worthwhile of having an event over, there's probably some additional follow-up learnings that also would be worthwhile to really keep the momentum going on that particular topic. So we try to kind of weave themes together over, the course of a quarter before we really like pivot and move to a different topic. So really just kind of building it as a learning journey that can gain momentum over the course of time has been helpful. And then also, after our in-person event that we had this summer, we had a keynote speaker from outside of the business that came. And then as a follow-up to the event, then we hosted just kind of a peer learning and networking session, right? Like, what did you learn at that event that's interesting? Or is this a topic that you've invested your own time in learning more about? And what can you share with others? And how does it really impact you personally and professionally? So just having those follow-up sessions, right? So it continues to be an experience, I think, has been helpful to us. And then, of course, asking that poll question when we end sessions too, asking folks like, did it add value, or would you recommend that we do more of these? So it kind of gets their stamp of approval and kind of commits them to then attending again in the future, right? If you said it was worth your time, it probably means that you would come back to. So it kind of gets them just mentally committing to more investment in the particular topic.
That's great, Liz. Yeah. I think I'll just add one more that, we talked a lot about our clients and with brands that we work with, to be thinking a little bit ahead in what that after event message is going to be. Events are a great lead generation tool when you're doing kind of external events. You get a lot of, emails from those who are signing up. And so making sure that you just have a plan for what is going to come next and how you want to use that information, because, leads are so valuable. And so making sure you have a plan for how you want to use them. We have a great question in the chat from Patrick. And so, for each of you, is there a humorous, or maybe humorous now, but maybe wasn't so funny in the moment, memory of something that was unexpected or went wrong at an event? And, what did you learn from it, or how did you go about kind of fixing it in the moment? Because as people who work in events, we all know that you can plan, but sometimes there's something that just unexpectedly goes wrong. Megan, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I didn't think it was very funny, but I go back to, I was working on a mobile tour throughout the country for Comcast, and it was an employee engagement tour that we ran a huge footprint out in the parking lots of these call centers with thousands of employees going through the footprint every single day. And they had an incentive to do that, which was points. We made it a game that they would get points for checking in at different things. And there was a leaderboard up on our main stage that really showed who was winning. And then at the end of the day, prizes were awarded. These were not small prizes. These were iPads and Beats headphones and all of this expensive technology that we were supposed to bring with them. And usually we would ship these prizes out. They would get delivered to the call center. They would be there waiting for us. Somehow they did not get brought with us. And it was about 2 hours before we were supposed to give these prizes away that all of a sudden it came to the attention of the field staff that was there that, hey, they're not in the tour truck. Where are all these prizes? And again, one of the things that we always like to say in the event world is, as long as the client or the main person doesn't know what's going on and you are able to fix it at the end of the day, it's okay. So I found myself frantically trying to buy out every Best Buy, Target, Walmart in the area of these prizes. And I also learned that they set limits on how many of those things you can buy at a time. So I was frantically running around to all of these stores trying to get the exact amount of prizes that were left back at our HQ. So not humorous in the moment. It's kind of funny to look back, figuring out that all of these things have limits and things on them. But yeah, that was not a great experience.
Corinne, do you want to share next?
Sure, happy to share. Also not a humorous experience, and probably still not humorous looking back on it. But it's a reality sometimes of things that are unexpected that happen when you plan events. The annual meeting client that I oversee. Their meeting we hosted this past spring, and we, of course, can select all vendors that come in and provide technology, that provide, F&B, but we had an incident, unfortunately, with one of the personnel on our tech team. They ended up using some demeaning and derogatory language toward our presenters as well as our audience in that particular breakout room. And of course, the rumor mill flies in like the event app and among attendees in immediate fashion. And we have a zero tolerance policy for this client and a code of conduct that has to be agreed upon to attend our meeting. So it was a situation where we had to immediately remove said person from our meeting and from the entire property, given the language that he used. So again, you can't always predict what people are going to say or how they're going to act, but in that case, that it was a direct reflection upon our team if nothing was going to be done. So we took action immediately to sort of rectify the situation, apologize to our attendees for the interactions that had taken place, and just move forward. But on the back end, as a planner, there's a lot of panic that's happening, and you're hoping to keep anxiety levels down from that standpoint. I will say, just as a kind of tie off to this story, the provider, the AV company, was very gracious and worked with us and apologized. But yeah, it was a very stressful situation in the moment. Again, Patrick, not humorous at this time, but maybe in many years we'll look back on it and say like, wow, they brought us donuts for that. That was so nice of them. But anyway, that's my story.
Liz, anything that you would like to share?
Sure. I think the one that comes to mind is, just kind of a casual event that we were planning for our employees was a local golf outing. And so we had been working with someone at the golf course to just, submit all of our details and get ready for the day. And then we had about, 80 of our employees show up, and the course wasn't ready for us. So they had actually double booked and sent another group out earlier in the day. And so we were, kind of there scrambling and had to adjust the game plan and the timeline and wait a bit. But, you kind of figure it out. And, of course, the employees were still happy to be together at a golf course enjoying the day. So a little bit of a delay didn't matter too much to the employees. But what we really figured out after the fact is that the person we had been working with sort of, just randomly quit and didn't pass on any of the information to the larger staff at the course. So it's definitely, helpful, if you can go on property, meet your event coordinators in person and make sure they really, know you and know the ins and outs of your events, and that, you're working with more than one person. So good lesson learned there.
Yeah, Liz, I was also just going to add on to yours. I think that's a great lesson in over communication that I have learned as well. It's so important to do, especially with when you have lots of vendors or you're working with a venue. I find myself sending the week before follow-up, the 2 days before follow-up, the day of follow-up. And I always apologize once I'm on site for saying, I'm so sorry for this nagging. I feel like I'm bothering you all the time. And always the response is, no, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for doing that. And I think in the event world, it can feel like that, especially if you're not hearing back from them, that you're constantly nagging them. But it's that idea of over communication, so that even if they have changed hands, hopefully that message is getting to the right person, and that everyone's on the same page. That's a huge lesson learned too.
Yeah. I'll just share too, at least on the NEWaukee side, hosting major events that are outdoors. We host a lot of, summer festivals, and, weather is just kind of an always, something that you can't predict and something that you can plan for as much as you can. But, sometimes it just doesn't work out. So over the years, rainouts, wind, I'll share, we had an event this past summer, and we had kind of like a wind tunnel in one area. So our flyers and our posters and everything were just constantly getting knocked over. And that's why you bring, extra extra tape and extra, supplies to make sure that everything can be like tacked down properly. But yeah, I think we all, as people who work in events, know that you need to have backup plans on backup plans. And even sometimes then there are just forces that are beyond your control. And so the best thing that you can do in those circumstances is communicate with your guests and just be open and transparent about things. And usually people are very gracious, and understanding. Corinne, how can you get brands more involved in an event beyond just a logo or a sign? When you're talking about events that have sponsors or other brands involved, how do you get them to, engage more than just, providing a logo?
Yeah, I want to share an example of a way that a brand got really engaged. And again, this is prefaced by the budget was very high for this client. I'll share a different example after. But for those that don't know, Madison, Wisconsin has been the host of the CrossFit Games for the last few years. And Reebok is a major sponsor, was a major sponsor, previously the naming rights sponsor of the CrossFit Games. And they did this really cool activation that was called the Reebok Fit Barge. So in Madison, we're on an isthmus surrounded by two lakes, and the only way, or not the only way, but a really exciting way to engage attendees in the community was to put something out on the lake. And you're driving down the causeway to get into the city, and you're seeing people working out on this multi-platform barge. And you're like, well, what is that? And this was their way of not only engaging attendees, but also just the community that is health and fitness for CrossFit goers and for Madison as a city. So you would sign up for free classes. This was all provided by Reebok, from 5 a.m. yoga down to like post-work CrossFit style workouts. They did this for a few years. It was super, super popular. Every class would sell out. But again, this was their way of interacting with the community and doing it in a way that felt really authentic for their brand, but also for the goers of the event and people maybe who'd never tried CrossFit or really even were engaged in the games as the event. So this was their way of being a sponsor and doing it in a way that was really big and beautiful and exciting for those of us in the community. And they used our lakes in a way that we hadn't seen before. So really, really cool. Again, big budget there. And, another example that I don't have a photo for, but for Women in Government Relations, we just hosted our annual meeting, and we offer sponsors a connection exchange is what we call it. And I know that's kind of terminology used for various things, but it's going back to that very first question we all talked about was how do you engage people in your brand in an authentic way by building kind of community and connecting with people. So this past year, I wouldn't say that they got super creative. I mean, one brand hosted trivia in the beginning of the event, but I will say in last year's event, it was a virtual conference, and one of the sponsors hosted like a flower crown workshop for it's a all women conference. They thought that would be exciting for attendees. They shipped everyone the materials in advance, and people signed on as a way to learn something new, but not necessarily have to be bogged down by yet another like seminar or knowledge of government in their session. So just a way to encourage sponsors to engage again authentically in the community that you're building.
Thanks, Corinne. And we're going to jump into Q&A here in a second, but before we jump into Q&A, I thought we could end with maybe each of you sharing an event that you've hosted that you feel was really successful. I think it would be great to hear, an event that you're each really proud of. Do you want to start, Megan?
Yeah, definitely. So one event that recently was just hosted here at NEWaukee was actually Southside Dining Week with our client North Shore Bank. And I think that was a really awesome way to bring the community together for the Southside community. And it's really in its early stages. It was only year 2 of the event, and we still had awesome attendees. We had awesome media coverage, despite the fact that it wasn't the inaugural year, which was really exciting to see that all come together. And one of the reasons I think it was really successful, outside of just the fact that it's serving that community, is it's really putting a spotlight on a part of Milwaukee and a scene of Milwaukee that doesn't always get the attention that maybe other parts, like the downtown aspect, really get. And so I think that is a really unique way for a brand to connect, North Shore Bank to promote that community. And then we tapped into other partners like Visit Milwaukee, who was able to say, hey, we love this idea, but is there a way to potentially really highlight it for a separate audience, which is those visitors of Milwaukee? So that's a really interesting idea that we are starting to explore, but it was just here in September, and it was a really awesome experience.
Corinne, would you like to share?
Sure. I'd like to just speak to the annual meeting that I currently oversee. And this past spring was my very first one for this client. And it was hosted in New Orleans. And the program co-chairs and president were really interested in bringing in the culture and the food and the authenticity of New Orleans into the meeting. And that's something, of course, I love, right? Those sensory things I talked about earlier. Just how do you build that in? And this, again, is a community of academics and researchers and psychologists. And as much as I know they love research and learning and teaching, they're people and they want to have a good time. And so for me, that's how I'm building in the sidebars of our annual meeting and making sure they have a great experience overall. So I learned a lot about the traditions of New Orleans and had a very fun time researching what we could do. And we brought in a second line and surprised our whole audience of 800 people with a very loud brass band, all in Mardi Gras garb, because we hosted our meeting the week of Mardi Gras, which logistically nightmare, but also really fun to just like bring them out of the corner of the staff office, go through the whole room. And we also surprised all the hotel attendees because we had to go through the entire hotel. It was really a way to get our attendees to move to the next event space. And it was so fun. Everyone was having such a great time. And that led them to a reception where we, had shrimp and grits and beignets and all of that alongside the river in New Orleans. And I think it was the first time they'd ever seen something happen like that at their annual meeting. And so I think we're just trying to build on the success of building in fun to a meeting where it's heavily academia and research. So I would just chalk that up to being one of my favorite successful events in recent time.
Liz, do you want to share?
Sure, yeah. I mean, earlier I mentioned our ZyFest event from this summer, so definitely the most recent event and really our biggest investment ever in bringing our people together. Obviously, it had a difficult layer of logistics that are involved. I think a lot of times when you're doing an external facing event, you're not always responsible for their travel, but when you're working with employees, then you are, right? So it's a whole other layer of logistics and communications of how are things going to be paid and expensed, and make sure all of those details are managed as well as we can. But it was just a really cool way to show off Milwaukee, because we have a lot of employees who have never been to Milwaukee and really kind of experience our headquarters, and it's the best time of the year for the city. So to be at an outdoor venue right along the lakeshore for 2 days where people, got to meet people in person for the first time that they've probably been working with for 2 years remotely. So we kind of went with the theme of forced family fun, right? We're here to spend 2 days together and make the most of it. And then also introduce some like choose your own adventure components. So they had the option to register for dragon boat races or, do something artistic for painting or kind of like minute to win it competitions. So we introduced the concepts of like personality archetypes, right? Like what is your archetype and where would you want to invest your time in a way that allows you to build connections with other people? So there was a little bit of science to it, on top of all of the time we spent together, like in the general sessions as well as breakout sessions. But definitely, the fun aspect is what people remember the most, kind of like what Corinne was saying. And so we did end our first night with a lip sync battle competition. So we had employees register, we had one solo act, which was very brave, and then lots of other groups that kind of worked on their performance and did things as a collaborative group. So that was definitely the highlight of the event and something that people, are asking to bring back year over year and keep that going as a new tradition. And the thing that we probably learned from that kind of initial experience is we have to structure networking, right? I think sometimes we think just putting people in a room together, they will figure it out and it will sort of happen organically. But that's not easy for most people. And so they wanted more structured networking opportunities and hours, kind of like speed dating, right? Where they can get conversations with people that they wouldn't normally have, because it is hard to just go up and introduce yourself and kick off a conversation off of nothing. So, making sure that we incorporate more time for that in future events of this scale, I think was our biggest takeaway.
Thanks, Liz. Jumping into our Q&A, I did see a question come through in the chat. For each of you, where do you see the future of events headed? What changes do you expect we'll see, or what changes are you already seeing in events as we head into kind of a future state coming out of the pandemic even? Corinne, do you want to maybe get started?
Sure. Yeah, I think I saw someone ask about seminars in the chat earlier, and I think as an example for women in government relations, pre-pandemic, they were an organization that did over 275 events a year. That's like educational events, luncheons, coffees, meeting with Congress people, panels, the gamut. And what we're seeing with that organization currently is anything educational in nature is staying virtual. So anything where there's a little bit less of the networking time built in, they're just offering it as a virtual component. That organization also saw a spike in non-regional members during COVID. So there was a reason to keep a lot of the events virtual. Their larger events that are celebrations and networking events are back in person. And I just think overall that virtual and hybrid component is still up in the air. The workshop I mentioned earlier about focaccia bread, we're hosting it virtually as well, or offering it virtually as well to anybody. But we're not seeing a large, take on that. Again, it's part of what Megan was saying. There's exclusivity and limited number of seats in person, and people want to be there. They want to be in the room where it happens. So I think it is interesting to see what events kind of take off that continue to stay virtual and have a hybrid component. But it's really interesting to see that's not picked up as much as, of course, it was before when it was more necessity. So I think the future holds some ambiguity in what people want, but at least in the short term, I think it's definitely a in-person experience together that people are craving.
Megan, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just add to that. I'm completely on the same page as Corinne. It's really interesting navigating all of these changes that we're seeing since the pandemic. We keep saying since the pandemic, though we're still slightly in some of those elements of it. So you still get people who want that hybrid element, but it's pretty few and far between of who actually utilizes it, though it's really great to always try to offer some aspect. So if someone isn't comfortable coming to an event, they have that opportunity to get involved in some way, though it might not be that full experience that you're offering at that in-person event. And like Corinne mentioned as well, I think that exclusivity and the ability to build that community at the event is still two of those driving forces that we're seeing with events. So having that opportunity to have a really awesome photo op at one of your events and be like, hey, this is a place that I got to go and see, and maybe a lot of my friends didn't get to go see it. That's still there, that idea of that FOMO. And I think that idea of community, and really since the pandemic, a lot of people have had that loneliness aspect, and they want to be out there. They want to be a part of something, and being able to offer that element of community, whether it's a super niche community for people who really enjoy this aspect, and you're providing an event that caters to that so they can meet other people that they haven't been able to see or connect with over the past couple of years. Those are really unique experiences that I think events are still really holding.
Liz, anything that you want to share kind of from the employer side, especially as, more and more workplaces are sort of distributed? What trends or, kind of predictions do you have for the future of events there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely leading virtually, right? Because it's just more accessible. The thing that I would add to that is the need for event planners to really pay attention to technology, right? It's technology that's going to transform the events and the experiences that we're hosting. So it just adds another layer of complexity and sort of another area that you have to, be trying new things, or at least know what's available on the market. And then it's also another big budget component, right? Like we didn't used to have to budget for a hybrid experience. So it really just adds that layer of complexity to the planning process, and consumes a lot of funds. So oftentimes you end up cutting in some areas in order to offer that hybrid experience. So I think the technology will drive our ability to better track data and figure out some metrics that really help us decide the ROI of certain events.
Thanks, Liz. I want to say thank you to each of our panelists for joining us this morning for a really great conversation. And I want to thank everyone in the chat. I know that there were a few questions that I wasn't able to get to, but I want to make sure that we're, keeping everyone's time this morning. However, Lauren's been adding everyone's LinkedIn information in the chat. So if you have additional questions that weren't answered, please feel free to reach out to one of us on LinkedIn. We're happy to keep the conversation going there. And we have been recording this conversation, so we'll make sure to share that out as a follow-up. But I just wanted to say thank you to all of you, and have a great rest of your morning.